Good morning, everybody. Go ahead and get started. So here we are, already starting to talk about ninth grade. Why so early? And one of the reasons is you may recall, for most of you it was probably 2 years ago, for some of you it was a year ago, you came to an accepted students reception in March. And then you started to get lots of information from our admissions office and then from my office, giving sort of information about the 7th grade program or the 8th grade program if it was a year ago. And right now, the 8th graders who go to other schools have been accepted to BCI. They and their parents are starting to get that information. Some of them are actually here today. Instead of accepted students reception this year, they're trying something a little different called a revisit day. So they're doing 3 of them. They come to one of the 3 over the next week or so. So those parents, and some of you, they're your neighbors or friends or whatever, are starting to get a lot of information from the admissions office. The first year we had in 8th grade, I started to get phone calls from some 8th grade parents saying, okay, my neighbor knows a lot more about next year than I do. When are you going to tell us about it? So that's why we do this now, because this is when it's going out there. It's a good time to sort of just get this information out. We get to you before we really start talking about it with the 8th graders. They're going to get, at the end of March, Mr. Smith, not to be confused with Miss Smith or Mrs. Smith. Mr. Smith, who's the academic dean in the high school, will talk about the course selection process, similar to this talk, a little bit different. With the 8th graders, they'll bring home a form at that time to do the course selection. They'll probably have a week or 10 days or something like that with that form. Ms. Smith will talk about that. But you know, they, for the most part, aren't doing a whole lot of thinking about next year. Some of the guys are. Some of the guys are looking at other schools or trying to decide if they're going to stay at BCI or not. So for those guys, there's a little bit more to it. You know, we have just so you know, a couple things we will do with the boys. You know, it's really in May, you know, other than the course selection assembly and then the course selection process. It's really May when we start doing more with them about, you know, we'll bring, usually it's a combination of freshmen, because some of them remember those guys from last year, and the junior mentors who they know, coming into study halls, free flex periods over the course of a week or so, and just sort of answering questions and talking to them about it. We've tried tours of the high school in the past, because a lot of guys haven't been to many parts of the high school. No one wanted to do it. And then you get one kid on the tour. They're just not quite thinking about that. But for some guys, if your son is applying out or is considering, not sure he wants to stay at BCI, we are very happy to set him up to do a half-day Eagle for a day in the high school. Very easy. They come in, they go to 3 classes. I say they wear their civvies, you know, not the Arupe shirt for the morning. Go to 3 classes in the high school, go to lunch, and then come back over for the rest of the day. If they really want to spend a full day, they can, but I think a full day is exhausting going to other people's classes. So just so you know, if that's the situation your son's in, let me know. The other thing I want to just mention down the bottom, some highlights for the 8th graders this spring. And the first highlight I want to say, and I've been trying to push this at the lunch tables this week, is the varsity basketball has a home playoff game tonight at 6 o'clock against arch rival Catholic Memorial. I'm not a huge basketball fan, but I think it's going to be an exciting thing for them to come to. So if your son's got nothing to do tonight, I've been trying to encourage it. It's in the announcements for a couple days. Monday we talked about the Tuesday night game. I think this is the last home game they can have, because then I think even if they win, they start to go to neutral sites. But I just think if a bunch of them go, there's a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement at a home game against an arch rival in the playoffs. It'll be fun. I think a lot of these guys right now need that piece of saying, oh, this is what I can be a part of. Because they, you know, 8th graders in February, March, get grumpy. So again, again, I'm encouraging it. If you can help with that, great. Varsity hockey's in the Super 8. They are, you know, game on Sunday, but they haven't announced the location yet. It could be down on the Cape, I think, or in Stoneham or something. Yeah, Bourne or Stoneham. They haven't announced it yet, but it'll be somewhere. The other thing, just in the month of March, March is a tremendously long month. It's like 60 days of school. And we don't have athletics starting up until April. So we try to do some extra activities throughout the month of March. Mr. Heller is coordinating these this year. It's called March Madness. We'll be getting a calendar out on that. He's sort of finalizing that. But try to offer some extra activities after school every day during the month of March as best as possible. We have a Smash Brothers tournament happening Monday after school. This was actually something that one of the 8th graders came to me and said, I want to organize this. So he's organized it, and we'll do it on Monday. But there'll be a bunch of things coming up, and we will get that out as soon as we have a sort of finalized list or close to finalized list. We have Nation Values Day coming up in a couple weeks. This is an all-school day. Last year it was, I think, on Ash Wednesday. This year it's a little bit later. And it's a focus on, this year it's arts, right?
Yeah.
In the arts. It's a great day. Don't look at it as a day to have your son stay home just because it's not a typical academic day. It's a good day for them to be here. They're going to be mixed, and sometimes it'll be mixed 7 through 12 groups, so it's a great day for them to do some stuff. I can't promise everything they do that day they're going to love. I think it's a great experience nevertheless. We have a service day at the end of March. We take the 8th graders on their service day. We go to adult daycare centers, nursing homes, things like that. It's called Ministry of Presence. I particularly like it when we go someplace and it's very difficult. And they get very awkward. You know, I used to go to a place in JP where they put us on the floor with the Alzheimer's patients, you know, for 2 hours and said, hey, entertain them. And the kids are like, what do I do? But again, it's a great experience. They get out of their comfort zone and we push them. You know, another time we went to a place and there was, the lady said to us, well, they're just kind of waking up. So why don't you just go around and knock on doors and say hello? And I see the kids going. And I had 2 of the kids, I think they don't know what to do. So I went with them and we got to this woman's room. She must have been about 95 years old. And she's talking on the phone with her daughter, and she says, I gotta go, I've got gentlemen here to see me. And she had us in, and it was great. So again, good experience. Sometimes they go to places and, it's a little bit, it's not as older a crowd, or it's a little bit easier crowd, but, if they do a lot of good things with them. In May sometime, we're gonna do grad talks, the grad, sort of 5 characteristics we hope the boys will be when they graduate 4 years from now. And we have them reflect on, hey, what progress have they made in those areas? To take 2 or 3 of those characteristics and look at that over the course of. So we give them a weekend, no homework except for to prepare for this, and they meet in groups, about 6, 7 kids with an adult, and just kind of have a conversation about, well, here's where I've seen growth, here's where I'm hoping to have growth next year, and then also during the month of May. We do the 8th grade video, so probably I will do this. Go around and we video every 8th grader. They have to minimally say their first and last name. Some of them put on elaborate skits. Occasionally they're funny. They're much funnier 4 years from now when I will invite you back with your sons for a breakfast during the last week the seniors have school in 2024. And we will watch the video together. And I like watching your sons watch the video. So that'll come up. We have a Grandparents' Day this year. Every other year we have a Grandparents' Day. It's sometime in May. I think it's after Memorial Day weekend, that last Thursday in May, I believe is when it is. You'll start to get more information about that, or your parents will, and it's grandparents, grandfriends. Some of the students don't say grandparents, but they have people, elderly people close to them. We'll get information out on that. It's a nice day. We sort of use it as, it's an afternoon. It's not really the whole day. It's really an afternoon. We use it as a way for them to showcase some of the things that they're doing, some of their projects, things like that. It's funny. It gives us a nice boost for about the last 10 days of school. Because just at the point where they're really complaining, they bring their grandparents in. They walk around with their grandparents for the day. their grandparents say, this is such a great school, this is such a great school. And they start to actually believe it themselves. And it lets us go about that last 10 days of school that we need to get through. The years we don't have it, it's a little rougher for us. We do it every other year. So they get it once in their 2-year experience in Aruba. And then the end, just this question comes up. We don't have a graduation from 8th grade. You'll all get to sit, hopefully, at that graduation 4 years from now with 4,000 other people in the McNeese gym, hopefully on a really hot Sunday afternoon. And that's the graduation from BCI. We do a final assembly on the last day of school that's dedicated towards the 8th graders. It's a very nice assembly. It's an internal. It's not for parents. And there's more humor to it than sort of soberness of a high school graduation. So it's a good adventure. All right, sorry, I went longer than I'm sure you expected me to do. I'm going to turn this over to Miss Kim Smith. Kim is the academic vice principal. She's been at BCI for a long time, served many roles, starting as an English teacher and department chair of English, the academic dean for a while, and then our vice principal for curriculum and professional development, and now she's the academic vice principal. A few of your sons have interacted with her because she's also been the diving coach the last couple of years, and we've had a couple of Arupe students on the diving team. And
they're all still safe, so that's
totally for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Smith.
Thank you. So welcome to the high school. It feels a little bit weird to say that because you've been welcomed before, and we hope that welcome continues, but welcome to the high school. Today, my goal is to talk to you a little bit about what this transition might be. Like Bob had mentioned, we sometimes make the assumption you've been here for 1 or 2 years, you guys are good, we're all in the same kind of big happy family, but there's some changes that happen both within your sons and who they are between middle school and high school, and within the institution consequently, because we really work hard to meet your sons where they are, and where they are changes over time. And so there are some changes that happen between the middle school and the high school that we want to make sure you're aware of, so it doesn't come as a surprise as you're walking through things that you recognize and are comfortable with. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the touchstones that we think are important for you to hear from us, but mostly I want to leave it open for questions at the end too, because there might be things that are important for you to hear from us that I hadn't considered in advance. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we feel your sons have been well prepared for the high school in their time in Arupe. I'm going to talk about homework comparisons, because that's one of the surprises that comes up and the fears that students in 8th grade start to express. Sometimes they start to express them in 7th grade about how homework is harder in the high school. So I want to talk through that a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about how we increase the self-advocacy expectations in the high school, and sometimes how that feels for students who are coming from Arupe and getting homework slips whenever they don't get their homework done, to a high school where you don't get communicated to, it just goes in as a 0 in the grade book, and why that happens, and what are the different ways that our support structures are still there, but look differently. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the course offering and course selections. Again, my colleague Tom Smith, the academic dean, will talk to your sons in more detail about what that is, but I want to make sure you know so that you can communicate with him at home when he's making some of the decisions that he has about the classes he'll be taking next year. And then I want to open it up for questions. So a little bit about how well we think your sons are prepared for high school coming out of the Arupe experience. I was the English department chair when Bob started formulating the Arupe program, and that is true. It makes me uncomfortable that I have to talk about it as a history, because I feel like it just happened. But we've been doing this for 13 years, 12 years? 13. Which means we've also been spending a lot of that time collecting information to see what the connection is and how well our sons, our boys, are transitioning from 7th and 8th grade up through the high school. Our Arupe students do phenomenally well in the high school. They are often in the top 10. They make up a majority of our top 10 students who graduate at the end of the year. They excel in classwork. They excel in leadership and co-curriculars. They are engaged and excited to be here. The comfort that they bring to the school, we see that come out in the ways that they are quick to get involved. And so there's a lot of data that we've looked at over the years in terms of the history of how well we feel comfortable that the students' experience in 7th and 8th grade here helps them do well, be successful in their high school years. One of the reasons that we attribute that to is, and you'll notice this, there's a lot of language and terminology that's the same. They know what a jug is. We don't have to explain it to them. Some of them know it more than others. But that term is the same. The way they experience it will be a little bit different because we do jugs every day. And that's scary for some of your sons perhaps. But not just jugs, but other language. Language like care for the whole student, cura personalis will hopefully be language that you've heard before, that you'll continue to hear for the next 4 years. They understand how liturgy works. They know how to get to McNeese for Mass. They know they have people in the building, and one of the things that I love is in 9th grade, we see our 9th grade Arupe students walking through the breezeway back to Walsh to touch base with some teachers. There's terminology, there's language, there's familiarity with how things go here. And so we've noticed that, and that comes with a real strong level of comfort. We find sometimes that level of comfort in the first few weeks might make their comfort in Jug and the new system of Jug more amenable. The fight over hooded sweatshirts starts with our Arupe students a little bit earlier than it does with our students who are new to the school. So there are little places like that that I think is good for you to see. But really what we expect of our rising 8th grade students is a sense of leadership and helping spread that comfort to our new students. And so we bring that up a lot in the orientation we have. For the first time, the whole class of 2024 will be together. We'll be in August. And so we assert that request of them. To whom much has been given, much is expected. We expect that leadership. We expect that to share. And we find that they do share that comfort with their new classmates. So that's a little bit of our thoughts about how we see them being prepared. With the exception of free periods, which is the thing that they like to talk about most in the transition, the second most common topic that I think comes up with our students who are transitioning from middle school to high school here is the fear around homework. And there is a difference in the requirements that we set out for homework. So I want to be clear about what our expectations for homework are. We expect in all 6 of your son's core classes that he will get about a half an hour of homework, no more than, but about a half an hour of homework per class per night. So that's 3 hours of homework daily is our expectation. That's about on average. If it's more than that, we need to hear. Because there are lots of different reasons why it's important that it shouldn't be more than that, mostly because for his health. It shouldn't be more than that. If it's more than that, we need to hear. We need to know if maybe he's misplaced. We need to know if he understands the expectations of what he has to do homework. We need to know if he's being distracted during his homework completion time. What should take 3 hours takes more because he's distracted. So we need to know if it's more than that, but it's still a difference regardless. We expect them to do more work at home. They also have that free period, and so some of that work is done during the school day before they leave. Some of them, a lot of our students stay late in the student cafe or the library completing their homework. They're here until 6. They might get those 3 hours done before they're off campus. We want to be a little bit clear about that. One of the reasons why it also takes a little bit more is that our work here in a lot of our, in the freshman level, a lot of the work, especially in English and history, but also in biology and religion, which might come as a surprise, there's a lot more reading. And so the reading requirement, and reading takes time if it's done well. And so we expect them to do more reading. And so that takes more time. And we expect them to do that in a wider swath of their classes. One of the other differences is their religion requirement is a year-long requirement, a 4-year requirement for a year in high school. So that they will have that all year, whereas right now they've had it for a semester each year. So those are kind of the basic comparisons between homework, but we like to get that on the alert for you so you expect that you know that's coming. Not that it's fearful, it's just different. It's a change for them. One of the other changes for them as they mature in age is our expectation for their ability to self-advocate. We don't expect them to come into high school with that ability at all. We don't expect it, but we start to expect them to learn how to assert it. So for example, if they are struggling in a class, we don't have the same sort of advisory system that meets regularly in that way. If they're struggling in a class, we expect them to find that teacher and seek help for that class. In some ways, that's not that different than what's happening in Group A. If they're struggling in math class, they go to see Mr. Lynch as early as 5 o'clock in the morning, right? So there's a familiarity there. It's just that it's a bigger place. And sometimes it's a little bit harder to assert that self in a bigger place. And finding that teacher, you have to go a little bit further. That tour, as much as they don't want to do it, is helpful. We give them one in August anyways, even if they refuse it. But the teachers are all over 3 buildings here. And so helping them make sure they know that they have to, and then how to do that, how to find them, when to find them, how to write the email that will set up a time to meet with them, is a form of self-advocacy that we really support. When problems are encountered, we really want, the way that we think of it is there are multiple layers to how to encounter a problem. Problem struggling in a class, not understanding a homework assignment, doing poorly on a test or a quiz. The first thing that we want to happen is have the student talk to the teacher. That's the first thing we want to happen. We encourage you to email the teachers too, but what hopefully they'll say to you is send your son to us. The first step in high school is have student speak to teacher. If that doesn't work, we ask the student to talk to their guidance counselor and say to the guidance counselor, can you help me with this? If that doesn't work, we ask the parent to step in and talk to the teacher. If that doesn't work, we have all of these plans. If that doesn't work, we ask you to talk to the guidance counselor and say, we've tried everything, nothing's working, and that's kind of when I get involved. I don't do that because I'm trying to stave off work for myself. I do that because we do that because it's really important for your son to have to take that initiative. It's hard. It's really hard to face a teacher who you just failed a test for and say, I need help. It's a very hard skill, and it's important for us that we get him to learn how to do that. There's a lot of support in learning how to do that. For us, the guidance department is the core of that support system. So your son will be assigned one of our guidance departments. Mrs. Domitz will meet with the guidance department and talk through with all of them about what she's learned about your sons for the past year or 2, depending on how long you've been here. And then that guidance counselor that you are assigned to, that your son is assigned to, will be the same, like it was in Arupe, the same guidance counselor for all 4 years. So that guidance counselor is there to help them with figuring out any problems that they encounter academically. They're to help them figure out how to get acclimated to the school, how to join clubs. Some of those guidance counselors will be there when your sons get cut from teams and help them figure out how to process disappointment. Those guidance counselors will be there and helping them select their courses year to year. And those guidance counselors are the ones that write their recommendation and help them figure out that college application process. So we get them started with those guidance counselors early. They meet, freshman year, they meet in small groups with their guidance counselor once per cycle. So they meet with them right now about every 7 days. It's going to change slightly next year, but every 7 to 10 days, they'll meet with them in a small group. And they have a curriculum. First semester, freshman year, that curriculum is get to know the school, get involved. That's really the basic. They get to know that small group really well. They get to learn about their guidance counselor. They pay attention to how to join clubs. They pay attention to study skills. They pay attention to how to write emails. They do all of the things that will help them be engaged in the school. And then each year, they meet in a small group with their guidance counselor for a semester, once a cycle, and each year that curriculum changes somewhat. We also have something that we call MMP. In some ways, I'll share with you the equivalency, sort of, though it's very different than the advisory program in Arupe. The MMP program for freshmen is set up so that they have a senior mentor. There are 4 senior mentors attached to every advisory group, every MMP group of about 12 freshmen. So those 12 freshmen, about 20 to 22 Mondays of the year, meet together for half an hour. And they do the same idea as the work in those guidance groups of getting students acclimated to high school, but sometimes they also bring in speakers. They write Christmas cards to different organizations for folks like Soldiers Abroad. They do some service work, some reflection work, and some connection work. And the work that the senior mentors do, that connection between our senior mentors and our freshmen, is one of my favorite parts of that program, because it tends to expand. Kind of like your sons had junior mentors when they were 7th graders. It's that same idea, just a little bit more regularly met with that. I explained a little bit about where parent involvement comes in. It's always a little tricky at this age because we want you to be involved. And we're all learning how to let them take the lead on that involvement. So I want to make sure you know we want to hear from you, and what you might hear from us is, okay, that's good, let's get your son to do this first. We're not trying to distance you, we're trying to help create that space for him to be the advocate for himself, his learning. Sometimes he needs extra support. We always want to hear from you. But this is the work that we do together, is to try to create that space for him as he matures into that really tricky adolescent phase of self-advocacy. So I'm going to transition now to the last part, which is just the way the classes themselves work here. And what they're, you're going to get a sheet on, I think, March 30th. The academic dean, Tom Smith, will be meeting with your sons and going over how your son will select classes for next year. There's not a lot of selection in freshman year, which is why we like to emphasize it, because choice really matters at this age. So we really like to highlight where his choice is and make sure he's going through a process of discernment to make that choice. But in 9th grade, all students take a year of Intro to Christian Thought, a year of English 1. They take a year of math, and that will be different depending. And I have a chart that Bob made for us to show you all of the different ways that we can get there in just a minute. He takes a year of a global history course, a year of a language of his choosing, and I'm going to pause there because that's one of his choices, and it's probably the most significant choice that he'll make because it's a 3-year commitment. Our requirement for graduation is that our students take 3 consecutive years of the same language. If he makes a mistake on the choice this year, he has a second shot as a sophomore. If he wants to switch languages, he can still meet the requirement. But it would be great if he spent some time thinking about, is the language that he's been studying the one he wants to commit to? In some ways, if so, that's great. That's an easy decision. If not, it's a great time to make sure he's making a choice that he wants to commit to for the long haul. All students take 1 year of a biology class, and then there are 3 classes that aren't full year, but that your son will take for a short amount of time during the year. So health and wellness, kind of like the health and wellness he took in 7th and 8th grade, he will take for part of his first semester. He'll take it every day for about 20 days. Group guidance, like I mentioned, it's once a cycle for that first semester. And then the other choice that your son has in front of him is the fine arts class that he wants to take. Our graduation requirement for fine arts is that he gets 1 full credit over the course of 4 years. A lot of those credits we offer quarter credit classes, which for those of us who aren't mathematicians, I studied this, it's 1 quarter credit class a year for 4 years, adds up to the 1. We offer half credit classes, so he could take 2 of those over the course of 4 years. Or there are full credit classes that are offered at AP levels, but usually you have to take some of the quarter credits to get there. You can go over, there's space in the schedule for them to go over the 1 credit, but the reason why I encourage your sons to think about the 1 credit in freshman year is that there's a temptation to say, if I don't take it now, I can take it later, and I get a free period. That's just the way their brains work. It doesn't help them to do that. Because as much as they want a free period next year, they're going to want it much more in their junior and senior year when they're looking at a harder class load and college application processes. So I suspect that might be a temptation. It especially comes because our Arupe guys know some of their friends who've been through this, and they might be thinking that that's a good choice for them. Let's work together on this as a team. That is not a good choice for them. There's a lengthy list of opportunities for them. We asked them, I think, for their top 3, and we might ask for their top 4 choices. It's rare that we had to go to that 3rd choice, but our students always get their first or second choice in that fine arts. So those are the selections. And all of this, I can go into more detail, but I thought I'd show you this really important graphic. Because one of the concerns that a lot of parents have is, how will I make sure that my son's getting an advanced in math as he wants to be in case his interests lie in something that will require advanced math for college? So no matter what class your son is taking next year, there is a road that will get him to calculus by his senior year. I show you this because, I can go through it with you. It's not as complicated as it looks, but what it shows you is that by 12th grade, no matter what, there's a calculus for him to take. So sometimes there's anxiety as you're starting high school that you don't want to miss something in these first steps because you're afraid of what it might mean for the college application process. We're trying to alleviate that fear. That all roads lead to calculus is sort of our mantra. They don't have to, is another sort of sidestep. Some of our students don't need to get to calculus, and that is fine and great. But because I know that that's a concern for a lot of folks, we think it's helpful to show this. The way we make a decision on what math he is in for next year is based on decades of understanding of how math learning works. And so if we, and by we I mean the math department at Arupe, in conversation with the math department chair in the high school, have conversations, if we have any concern that your son is missing something that's foundational in his math learning, we're going to put him in the math that we think is appropriate for him. If you disagree, we do want to hear from you, but I do want to say it comes from knowing that if like any foundation, if there's like wiggly stuff in there, it doesn't help to keep building up on top of it. And so that's the way that we think through our math progression. Your son's current math teacher, his grade, and his teacher's understanding of how he's been learning in math in conversation with the high school will give him a placement for math that will either be geometry honors, algebra 1, or for some of them, algebra 2 trig. And those are the ones who've been taking geometry already. Bob?
Just so you know, I forgot to make copies of this, but we'll put in the downloads of the Ruby update today. And I see a lot of people taking photos.
Oh, sorry, yeah, and we're going to post
copy
this
of-
PowerPoint. So
Yeah.
you're welcome to take pictures too, but we'll post the PowerPoint. So you're going to get a form. Your son's actually going to get this form. Please look for it. Your son's going to get this form that's going to ask him, what fine arts do you want to take? And there are some options, like I had mentioned before. Some of them, if they've done performative work in terms of their voice or with musical instruments and they're interested in that, they can sign up to do chamber orchestra, jazz big band, concert band, jazz rock ensemble, concert choir, or liturgical musicians. And that is something that happens before or after the school day. Some students choose this because it gives them a free. That's not a great reason to choose it, but if they want the free and also like music, it's a great reason to choose it. But this also, it's something it's important that if, especially the choirs, which start at 7:20 in the morning, if that's going to pose an issue for his commute or for your morning rituals, that's something that you have to discuss as a family and make that decision. The after-school ones too, one of the tricks with the after-school ones is that they conflict if your son, depending on the season, wants to play sports or with some other co-curriculars. I don't say that because I don't want them to do that. I would love them to do this. They're fantastic programs. Our music department here is so strong. But I want everyone to be aware of, as you make one choice, that there are effects of that choice. The second level requires some application process. So it's a visual foundations, a theater foundations, and a sculpture studio class. So those are those half-credit classes. So in second semester of his freshman year, what that means is those classes meet every day for a semester. And he earns 0.5 credit in fine arts, so half of his graduation requirement. If your son's really interested in drawing or painting, the visual arts, if your son's really interested in performing or supporting the performance of others by being backstage, so the theater arts, or if your son's really tactile and you think doing sculpture would be something that would be good for him to do every day, those would be great options. Those meet every day. They start second semester. What we can't have happen is have him choose in the next 2 months, I want to do that, and then next January be like, just kidding, I really want my free period back. So it's an important thing. If they love these things, these are great tracks for kids who have a passion already in them for these particular ones. These bottom ones that you'll see are the quarter credit electives. We have many more of these for lots of reasons. A lot of our boys haven't yet found their passion for the arts. And so the quarter credit classes offer a breadth of experience from music to visual arts, theater, and voice that give them a chance to, without a huge commitment, a quarter credit, which means about every other day for a semester, experience a variety of different arts. So over the course of his 4 years, he might take a voice class, a digital photography class, a drawing class, and a guitar ensemble 1. That would be fascinating study, I think. So hopefully your sons might agree with that. Those are quarter credit classes. Those are the ones where we ask for the top 4 choices. These 2 happen during the school day. These happen outside of our bell school day. Tracy.
Just one thing I'd say about auditions, for the groups that have it, like the liturgical musicians, we'll have it in the announcements, and I'll be telling the boys like constantly about those deadlines for auditions if they are applying, getting their applications in, so it won't just be sort of somewhere in the ether. We will tell them.
These one in the middle are half credit. Liturgical musicians is also a half credit. And the bands, depending on your involvement, could be anywhere from a half credit to 3/4 credit. It just depends on how long you do it for, which is why I don't spell it out because it's varied. The course catalog has all of that in there, but there's a variety that makes it less clear. Like visual foundations and theater foundations are predominantly freshman classes, so students tend to not want to take those after, and they're also only offered in second semester, so you can't take them as sophomores. So these would be ones, if these are things that they already know they're interested in, it's good to pay attention to them now. But the other ones you can switch over the course of time. There's a couple of classes that are offered in the summer that we call enrichment classes, but they meet the graduation requirements as well. So if that would be something of interest, they're welcome to do it that way. The second part is, let me make sure there we go. Okay, so the second one is around language. So again, like I said, probably the most important just because it's a longer commitment. Those fine arts you can adjust over time, so you're not making a 4-year commitment. Language we like to think of as a 3-year commitment. So your son's been studying a language here already. It's great to continue on with it. His teacher will let him know what if he wants to stay in the language he's currently in, what the application process is for getting into honors or a higher level course of that. Even if your son starts in a second level language, he still needs to take 3 years of it in the high school. So if he gets into Chinese 2 honors next year, he still needs to take it for 3 consecutive years in the high school. It's not done at the level 3, it's done after 3 years. But that being said, if he wants to stay in the same language he's currently in and is interested in honors options or making sure that we want to place him correctly, his current teacher is in conversation with the high school, will work out how to place him. There will be some sort of written piece that they're going to ask for, but they'll talk about that in their language class. If he wants to change languages and doesn't have any experience in his new language, he'll start at a level 1 of that language, and that will be fine, and he'll take that for 3 years. We just ask that to know if he isn't continuing, just because it helps us figure out class sizes and sections for the year. Yeah.
If they want to continue their current language, but pick up 2 years of a second language, is there room in the curriculum time frame for that?
That's a great question, and I'm going to use our classics department as the example where that happens most often. So if your son is in Latin, a lot of times they also want to take Greek. And how we do that is that sophomore year is when the Greek would start. So he would take Latin as a freshman, so his first year of Latin as a freshman. He would start Greek in his sophomore year. And so what he ends up having to do in his sophomore year is replacing his social studies or science class with the Greek class instead during the school year. He can do that and then take chemistry his junior year as one of his electives and then finish up his science or social studies in his senior year while taking Greek 1, 2, and 3, and then Latin, whatever level 2 and 3. So it's a way to do it. It requires some juggling. A lot of students who choose to do that also choose to take their chemistry or physics class in the summer because it gives them a little bit more freedom in their schedule. It's not required, but it's one of the common ways that students take the 2 languages for 3 years. Then the math one's a little bit easier because basically the math teacher sort of decides once you get that placement and you're told where your son will be. If you have concerns or if you think there's a mistake or something, please let us know. We want to get it right. And it will provide us an opportunity to have a conversation to make sure we're getting that placement piece right. Honors in math usually just means it moves much more quickly. And so there's an expectation that those mathematical ideas come more naturally or come quickly. I think quickly is the best. It's kind of about speed and processing on that. If you know your sons, if you think, yeah, he's really good at math, but I don't need him to be pushed in that way in math because maybe he's taking the semester-long visual foundations class, or maybe he's advancing in a language that he's going to need to spend more time on. Think through that. What do you want his freshman year experience to include? And talk with him about what that means. It's a heavier workload, which is great. That push is great for a lot of our students, but it doesn't have to always be the place where he gets pushed. So that you think through that with him and help him articulate how he wants to find that balance is a really important step on that part of it.
When do all these forms get circulated again?
March 30th, your son will receive them. We're going to ask them back, I think, on Holy Thursday, April 9th. When it comes to course selection specifically, we build in a lot of formal time. So 2 to 3 of those group meetings that happen are dedicated to talking about it in that small group. And then counselors meet one-on-one with all of their students between the January and when their course selection proposals are due in March. So there's a formal one-on-one and 3 formal group meetings. And then the informality also, the idea is that that also breeds that informality, because sometimes, as you well know with teenage boys, them dropping in and kind of saying something on the fly is where you get most of your real work done. So the idea is we build in these formalities in hopes that it encourages those drop-ins so that those informalities we can also sort of figure out. That's for course selection. For other things, our guidance department works really closely with our teachers on paying attention to if this kid's not doing their homework. Our teachers will email the guidance and say, what's going on? This isn't helping. That communication for us is between teachers and guidance counselors to do those supports, because oftentimes, this might come as a surprise, oftentimes your boys don't come to us and say, I'm really struggling, this is hard for me. So we have ways to pay attention to that, to encourage that in. That is informal, but it's pretty active and a very present practice that our guidance department and teachers go through. Homeworks receive the grade, and so if homework is not being done, it impacts the grade. We have the open grade book, but most of our teachers try to get to it every couple of weeks to make sure it's updated. Every couple of weeks it's in there, so we have a sense of where it is. So for example, I know a math teacher that I'm thinking of off the top of my head who collects homework every day, and every other Friday puts that up on campus. So there's an attention to it that way. Your son knows. What's tricky is figuring out that communication. So what we try to do too is say, hey, you can look at Canvas, see what the assignment is. Did you finish that assignment? And ask those specific questions about the assignment. The other supports that we have is when we start noticing, when the teachers notice talking to the guidance counselor, we have a requirement to have some of our students either do an after-school homework club, which is kind of like the homework slip situation, but we really only do that for our students who are really struggling. Or we assign them into the Academic Resource Center during their free period, where attendance is taken, they have to show up, do their work then, and if they don't go, it's like another class and they get a jug for not attending. So those are the two kind of dire situations that we have. The community service requirements just changed, but I'm pretty sure I know the numbers now. It's 10 hours freshman year, 20 hours sophomore year, and 40 hours junior year. They just changed it a little bit. The junior year, the freshman and sophomore years are done through their religion classes, so the requirements and those kinds of details and the reflections on that service is done through the religion classes. The junior year, it's done through reflection groups, so they might be assigned, if they sign up for it, they can be assigned that reflection group to happen over the summer if they don't want to do it during the school year, and then some of the students who do it during the school year are assigned that reflection group during the school year. So the way that it's done is, freshman year, it's supposed to be service at home, so you're welcome, and think about ways that your son can serve at home. Sophomore year, it widens that circle a little bit to their community, and then junior year, we ask them to widen it primarily to a larger or wider net of community, so they're not just in their comfort zone, like Bob had described before. We push them to get outside that comfort zone regularly their junior year. We don't assign guidance counselors until early August, so their new guidance counselor they won't know, but Tracy knows the system really well, so helping them get ready for high school, she's in that same department, she knows all of the pieces, so.
And I would say to an earlier question, and Kim mentioned it, but I meet with every guidance counselor at the first week of school going over their caseload of room-based students. So whether it's just like a fun fact about your son, if he's been chugging along, or if they're going to need those touch points earlier on, just going over their profile as a whole and what supports I've given them will be transferred to their guidance counselor.
Our general guideline for math is in Algebra 1, because in pre-algebra, it's only Algebra 1, there's no honors Algebra 1, it's just Algebra 1. But if he's in Algebra 1 this year, and the general rule is B+ or better in Algebra 1, he's ready for geometry honors. Now, if he got that B+ because he was spending 3 hours a night on Algebra 1 homework, then that's something maybe a piece we don't even know about, that we would want to have that and say, hey, that might not be a good idea. He may check off, no, I don't want to be considered. But to be considered, now, it's also a situation where, hey, maybe he struggled earlier in the year, but then he really pulled it together. And he may not have a B+ average for the year, but there's some real reason to say, yeah, but look where he is now. And that may, so we may, juggle a little bit that way. And the same with if he's in geometry honors, whether he's ready for Algebra 2 honors, it's sort of that B+ or better, but again, even a little more flexibility there, I think, would be, depending on, so where's the trend right now? If he was a B+, but now he's getting into a C range, that's probably going to change that. But the same with the opposite of that.
We do want to make sure that you feel welcomed in and understand the different parts of this transition, so keep us posted how we're doing in terms of communicating, and just let us know if you have any questions. So thank you for coming this morning.